Okay, we're having a little discussion here about jaundice, particularly pediatric jaundice. So, first of all, understanding what jaundice is exactly. So, basically, what you have going on is you've got blood vessels that lead to your liver, and then, of course, it exits your liver, and then here's your gallbladder, goes into the body. Okay, so so what's happening with this is your liver, okay? And so if it happens before your liver, they call it prehepatic jaundice. And if it happens after your liver, they call it posthepatic. And if it happens in there, they call it intrahepatic. Pretty straightforward, right? Well, it just so happens that bilirubin, which is kind of what your body's dealing with here. Think of it sort of like a waste product that's running through your blood. So this bilirubin is in your body, and it goes into your liver, and there in your liver, it becomes conjugated, okay? So up here, it's unconjugated. And down here, after it's gone through your liver, it's kind of altered, and now it is conjugated. Okay. Another way of saying this is they call the unconjugated, they call it indirect bilirubin. It's kind of a way of measuring it, and they call the conjugated just direct, which is nice because there's an in and an un up there, and there's no in or un on the other one. So kind of the difference in how this works is that the unconjugated bilirubin is fat soluble, okay? Fat soluble means that it doesn't mix with water well, which means you can't pee it out. I think that's part of the reason why it goes through the liver, is the liver conjugates it so that you can pee it out. Okay, so that means that conjugated or direct is not fat soluble, it is water soluble. Okay, so if we're dealing with a problem with your indirect, unconjugated, fat soluble bilirubin, they call this goodness gracious, they call it a physiologic jaundice. Let me make sure that's right, though. I gotta look on my little sheet here. So indirect, unconjugated is physiologic. Yes, that's right. Sorry, I had a little brain. Physiologic. Okay. And if it is direct, conjugated, water soluble, they usually call this pathologic problem. Now, this is if there's elevated levels. That's kind of how they deal with the two. So usually when we're looking at these guys up here, indirect, unconjugated, fat soluble, physiologic type jaundice, bilirubin we're dealing with, usually that's going to be from something like hemolysis. Now, did hemolysis occur before the liver or after the liver? Obviously before, so it's prehepatic. Or maybe hemorrhagic. Okay, did that happen before or after the liver? Obviously it happened before. And these mixed types, this is kind of the intrahepatic region. Okay, maybe I'll do that in purple. This is kind of intrahepatic. I'll kind of specify here. This is 1, and then this is 2. And then down here, green, I'll do is 3. Okay, so if we're dealing with the kind of intrahepatic issues, we're looking at Crigler-Najjar, and we're dealing with Gilbert syndrome. Those two diseases are unconjugated. So I'm going to put a little thing here and show they go up in this category. But there's also some other kind of mixed or intrahepatic ones, and this is, for example, Dubin-Johnson syndrome, and also rotor, and maybe even hepatitis. Okay? And those are the direct, conjugated, water-soluble, pathologic kind of category. Okay? So now we're going to deal with the last, sorry, this is kind of a mess, the last little category here, which is the conjugated, direct, conjugated, water-soluble, pathologic, and this is going to be something like an atresia, which means maybe this got blocked off or something, or maybe it has to do, if this gets blocked off, then everything kind of backs up and it goes this way, or maybe it has to do with like sepsis, the person's really sick, or maybe it has to do with some sort of metabolic problems. And those are the ones we really worry about because they're really hard to deal with sometimes. So hopefully that kind of clears that aspect up for you. I know that looks very messy, but hopefully you're following as I was writing so you can know what I'm talking about. Okay, so now let's look at the next part here. So now we kind of understand what's going on with that. Let's look a little bit here at an algorithm, okay? So what do we have first? We have ourselves a yellow, oops, that's green. I meant to do the yellow. We have a yellow baby. And I'm thinking maybe I should actually type this out because it's hard to see. So what if somebody comes in, a yellow baby comes in, what's the first thing we want to do? Well, we want to get a bilirubin. I'm going to change this to black so you can see a little better. First thing you're going to want to do is, oh gosh, let me just start over again here. Okay, so yellow baby comes in. Here's the yellow baby. Here is the yellow baby. So the first thing we're going to want to do is want to get check the bilirubin, okay? And if we check the bilirubin, what are we going to find out? We're going to find out that the bilirubin is either going to be it's going to be conjugated, or we're going to find out that it's going to be unconjugated over here. And remember, already we know just from what we talked about a minute ago that if it is conjugated or underconjugated, we already know that it has some certain qualities to it, and we maybe even know narrowed it down quite a bit. If it's unconjugated, we know that it hasn't gone through the liver yet, so it must be a number of different things. We usually call this, indirect, and we sometimes say that it is physiologic, and we also know if it's indirect, it must be fat soluble. Okay, so that means that cannot be excreted as urine, and ultimately it's probably going to be from hemolysis or hemorrhage or something like that. But we'll get to that in a minute. So what if it's conjugated? Well, if it's conjugated, then we know that it must be direct bilirubin, and that it is pathologic, and that it is water soluble, so it can be excreted as urine. So what does that tell you about symptoms? I mean, right there we'd know, okay, if it's water soluble, it can be excreted in the urine. So it's very likely, if you see unconjugated bilirubin, that you're also going to see some dark urine going on here, okay? And if you're looking at the other case, you're probably going to be looking at some normal urine, okay? So just a little clue there, kind of off the bat. So now let's look at the next thing. So let's go down this conjugated path. So we looked at it, it's conjugated, therefore it must be pathologic. We're going to do a workup. What workup are we going to do? We're going to do a workup of an ultrasound, and let me write all this out. So we're going to do an ultrasound, and we're doing the ultrasound. We're going to do a HIDA scan. We're going to do a HIDA scan. We're going to do phenobarbital. We're going to do sepsis, and we're going to look into those kinds of things, check for those. And after checking into those kind of things, we're going to be able to determine, then the other things it might be, is maybe a metabolic genetic disease of some kind. So that kind of gives us that direction. So what about the other situations here? So it could be that it is conjugated, indirect, physiologic. So now we've got to figure out here, first thing we're going to do is something called a Coombs test, okay? So it can be either a Coombs positive or Coombs negative. So Coombs test, we do the Coombs test. So let's say the Coombs test comes out positive or negative. So let's say Coombs test positive versus Coombs test negative. What does this tell us? Well, first of all, the Coombs test gives us an indication as to what the cause is going to be. So let's look at the Coombs test positive first. So if it's Coombs test positive, what we're looking at here is it's some kind of isoimmunization. Okay? Whereas if it's Coombs test negative, then we need to look at the hemoglobin. Okay? So now there's a couple options here. The hemoglobin. The hemoglobin, it can be normal, it can be low, or it can be high. Okay? So it can be, like I said, normal, or it can be low, or it can be high. So let's look at normal first. If the hemoglobin is normal, what does that tell us? Normal hemoglobin says that that we need to check the reticulocyte count. Maybe I'll go down these other avenues first, actually, because it's a little bit more. The other one, the reticulocyte count one is a little bit longer. So sorry, let me go down these other ones first. So first of all, let's go down the low hemoglobin. Okay, so if it's low hemoglobin, what does that tell us? If it's low hemoglobin, it's either going to be a hemorrhage or like a cephalohematoma, something like that. And if it's high, then we're looking at elevated hemoglobin. Then we're looking at some kind of transfusion is going on here. So it could be like, could be twin. So there's two twins in there. They're kind of messing up each other's blood, or it could be some kind of other issue going on. Maybe delayed cord cutting or something like that. So now what about the normal? Well, if it's normal, what we need to do is we need to look at the reticulocyte count. And there are two situations that can happen on the reticulocyte count. We can have a reticulocyte count that is normal or one that's elevated. So let's look at normal first. So if it's normal, then what do we have going on? Normal reticulocyte count is going to be some sort of reabsorption problem. Okay, so and there's two conditions we think about with this. We can look at, let me scroll down a little bit. No, can't scroll down. We can look at, let me scroll on this way, reabsorption. So it can be, breast milk jaundice. And breast milk jaundice, essentially what's going on is that it's going to be after 7 days, and you probably need to give the baby formula. Okay? It's the breast milk that's causing the issues. We won't go into all the details there. Or it might be breastfeeding. And this usually happens before 7 days, and you just need to feed more. Okay, so what about this other situation here we're dealing with? I'm going to kind of extend this down because I ran out of room. Okay, so what about reticulocyte count that is elevated? Okay, elevated reticulocytes. Well, in that case, we're looking at the hemolysis. And if there's hemolysis, then we're thinking maybe G6PD deficiency, or maybe it's a pyruvate kinase deficiency, or something like that, or hemoglobin SS. Those sort of things, okay? That kind of gives us a little bit of an idea of what we're dealing with here. So let's walk through this again. Yellow baby. First thing we do, we're going to check the bilirubin, okay? Bilirubin conjugated, could be all these things. Conjugated, you're going to probably have dark urine, and you got to do an ultrasound, high scan, phenobarbital, look for sepsis, metabolic problems, those sort of issues. If it's unconjugated, and they're probably going to have normal urine then, this means it can go into the brain, fat-soluble tissues. You need to do a Coombs test. And with the Coombs test, if it's positive, probably isoimmunization, which means that I think the blood vessels are essentially killing themselves. If it's negative, though, you need to check the hemoglobin. Hemoglobin high, It's a transfusion issue. Hemoglobin low, hemorrhage or cephalohematoma. Hemoglobin normal, reticulocyte count. Normal reabsorption, breast milk greater than 7-day formula, breastfeeding less than 7 days, you got to feed them more. And if it is an elevated reticulocyte count, hemolysis, G6PD, pyruvate kinase deficiency. So most of the situations here are going to be under normal urine with unconjugated indirect physiologic fat soluble. Anyway, I hope that is helpful. That pretty much covers most everything. I guess normally, if I add a couple more notes in here, I would have to say that typically, the unconjugated, I'm going to put this in gray, the unconjugated is also typically going to be, if it's going to have an onset of greater than 72, I'll put this onset greater than 72 hours, and its resolution is going to be less than 2 weeks, and it's usually, yeah, I think that's enough to have there. And let's look at this other one here, though. The in the instance of conjugated, it's usually going to have its onset is going to be less than 24 hours, and its resolution is usually going to be over a week, and 1 to 2 weeks. And anyway, and this one's got to end in surgery, whereas usually, maybe I should put the surgery down here then. Surgery, whereas this other guy, usually it ends in, something like, worst case scenario, like a Billy blanket, or maybe it ends in like a exchange, but worst case scenario is probably an exchange transfusion. Okay, because basically you're just trying to conjugate this bilirubin so that you can pee it out. Okay. Whereas this one, it's conjugated, it's building up, and so you probably need some kind of surgery or something, or maybe it's metabolic, you can't do anything. Anyway, that pretty much covers this video. I hope that was helpful for you.